Hi, hello, and welcome to this episode of Geography Girl. Today, we're taking you back to the mid-19th century to explore the curiosity of the 1851 Great Exhibition of Works, held in London's iconic Crystal Palace. This groundbreaking event was the world's first international exhibition and showcased the very pinnacle of industrial innovation, art, and culture from across the world. The halls of this magnificent glass structure not only contained industrial and technological advancements, artistic achievements, and cultural exhibits of the time, but it was also a stage for the English to promote their ideas about globalization, free trade, colonialism, and industrialization on an evangelical level. Stay tuned for a fascinating look at the exhibition that changed the world. Inspired by the Parisian Great Exhibition that captured the imagination of the world the year before, the English establishment very much wanted to put on a grand event in 1851. They wanted to showcase the achievements of English industrialization and entice the world's population into its evolving capitalist sphere. Whether this was a conscious decision or not, we'll see when we look at the narrative of the time in various articles and speeches. On the one hand, on its surface level, it looks like an ambitious event to bring together millions of people from around the world to celebrate Britain's industrial achievements, both on home soil and also in its colonies. Or it was a very purposeful, subtle tool of propaganda for the English to convince the rest of the world to allow them to exploit them in a capitalist system. I feel like I found a gem of a story in this video, so let's dive in. To give you a basic overview, Crystal Palace was originally located in Hyde Park. It was a widely celebrated behemoth of a structure which was purpose-built to host the Great Exhibition in 1851. The structure is made from 1,000 iron columns and 84,000 metres of glass, in a design that was inspired by the giant leaves of the Victorian Amazonica water lily. The genius behind the design was a Sir Joseph Paxton, who was an already respected architect and gardener who was able, in his own impressive feat of engineering, to design the structure in a modular fashion, meaning it could be put together in a matter of months. This was important as the English establishment wanted to waste no time in flexing its industrial muscles to the world. The Great Exhibition of Works of Industry of all nations was the first ever international exhibition of manufactured products, with 10,000 articles of machinery. It was visited by over 6 million people and generated a profit of £186,000 of the time. The Great Exhibitions were a series that ran throughout the 19th and 20th centuries and have historically been really influential in bringing countries together and sharing ideas. So, this Geography Girl is going to cover more of these. We've actually already covered one of them, with the City Beautiful movement, which transformed America. This was originally showcased in Chicago's version of the Great Exhibition and ended up inspiring much of the design of Chicago, Washington, D.C., and even cities in other countries like Canberra and Manila. On the first day of the London event, it attracted 25,000 people, bringing in factory and agricultural workers, diplomats, members of the royal family, and politicians who wandered through the labyrinth of fine arts, architecture, and feats of industrial achievement. It was truly a product of its time, showcasing Britain's maturity as an industrial capitalist powerhouse and a colonial ruler, and showing off British achievements on home soil as well as exploits from overseas. But the undertones in the narrative surrounding the event expose something deeper. It's not just a proud demonstration of what England can do, but it was a subtle sirens call by English society to convince the rest of the world to play in its capitalist game. We'll see this in the writings of the time. The weekly journal, The Household Words, was edited by none other than Charles Dickens. We can see ingested into his take on the exhibition the wish to highlight that England was the centre of the world, through an allegory about a Christmas pudding. A Christmas pudding begins with Mr. Oldknow, the tale's protagonist, concerned at an apparent lack of Christmas pudding prior to his household's seasonal festivities. Voicing his anxieties to his wife, Oldknow is led into a clean and orderly kitchen, a room from which he'd been banished by the refinements of the age, but which is nevertheless dominated by patriarchal agency, in the form of an enormous grandfather clock. Mrs. Oldnow swiftly retrieves the family recipe book and proceeds to read aloud the recipe for a pound Christmas pudding, which bears testament at once to the domestic order and expansive span England's commercial connections. The story proceeds to anthropomorphize the composite ingredients of a Christmas pudding as various characters in the theatre of capitalism. There's Nutmeg, who represents the Dutch colonialism in the Spice Islands, who has given up the contest against nature and is converted to the notion of the world of free trade, saying, "You have taught me a lesson." There's the genius of sugar, a freed slave, and the milky genius. However, all of these elements are synthesized together by metaphors around work and industrial sophistication, such as the power loom weaver, who steps forth with pudding cloth in hand. "The water boils," said he, "the ingredients are mixed. Be it mine to bind them together." It's such a good metaphor for capitalism. Oldnow proclaims the lesson which can be drawn from this culinary enterprise is that the products, people, and nations of the world are united by free trade industrial capitalism. We, in our united interests, bound together, produce Christmas pudding, which is exactly the sentiment the World Exhibition sought to promote. In an essay by Kriegel, she describes the exhibition celebrated progress as it was embodied in its display of raw materials, machinery, and manufactures. Its founders, the Prince Consort Albert and the civic servant Henry Cole, imagined that the matchless collection would attest to the march of free trade, democratic consumption, and empire. The Great Exhibition annihilated the distance between nations, containing worldly commodities within its great glass case. Recent criticism of the Great Exhibition has emphasized that its organizers found it politically unwise to explicitly promote the event in terms of free trade. By marketing the exhibition as a festival of global peace and industrial progress, rather than a specific attempt to remove international trade barriers, protectionist supporters could therefore be appeased, according to Jeffrey Albuch. Underlying both the article and the speech was the implication that the exhibition would make manifest the global symmetry of the natural theory of interchange. The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, who's known as the father of capitalism, was very much the background when putting this event together. This gave the event an authority that needed to be carefully managed. An article in the Times reports, "The Wealth of Nations, which taught us that it was in the interest of every tribe of people upon the earth to remain at peace with each other, to exchange the commodities of several countries of the world for the benefit of all, to extend the knowledge and the information of every country for the improvement of all." The expectation was that the exhibition would display the global symmetry of the natural theory of interchange. You could interpret the narrative around this event as pretty audacious. Part of the storyline was around embracing our differences and the great principle of the division of labour. Listen to this. "The products of all quarters of the globe are placed at our disposal, and we have to only choose which is the best and cheapest for our purposes. And the powers of production are entrusted to the stimulus of competition and capital." It is a level of entitlement which is basically trying to justify and normalise British exploits overseas, in a way that suggests that this is the way the world should work. The global scope of the display would provide a visual form to a narrative of capitalist progress, a good story which told of peace, unity, and improvements inherent to the international division of labour. It was an imperial fantasy. The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, who is known as the father of capitalism, was very much in the background when putting the event together. This gave the event an authority that needed to be carefully managed. An article at the time reports, "The Wealth of Nations, which taught that it was for the interest of every tribe of people upon the earth to remain at peace with each other, to exchange the commodities of the several countries of the world, to extend the knowledge and information in every country for the improvement of all." Baked into Dickens's narrative is an allegory known as the genius of the raisin. This highlights the regional traditions and idiosyncrasies which the political economy had disregarded, reusing the logic of the international division of labour, and contends that the demands of the market are overridden by the direction of the profit. This is clearly supposed to represent an unenlightened or naive foreigner. The protagonist in the story refers to the raisin as the child of an Arab who should be grateful for an entirely natural, inherently dynamic, and mutually beneficial artificial system. The story exposes the limitations of universalistic assumption that the concept of free trade and the international division of labour make. In the story, whilst the raisins can reject the rationale of capitalism, he cannot escape his fate of being cooked inside a Christmas pudding, which is the representation of English capitalism. Bound by the pudding cloth and boiled in the pudding bowl, the raisin is reduced to order through a process which can be understood to represent the coercion and violence of industrial capitalist expansion. William Forster, the author of Closing of the Great Exhibition, summarises it so well. England desired labour to raise other nations in the scale of social order, not only because it was benevolent but prudent. It was England's God-given duty to interpret national interests, to forward national objectives, and to make other peoples feel we consider their prosperity ours. And that leads me into the next section. J.C. Wish wrote that the event would become the greatest wonder of the world. He stated that God hath made one blood of all nations, claiming that free trade was the creator's scheme of life. Immorality and the market in Victorian Britain, G.R. Sells notes that the political economy tended to assume the existence of a natural harmony of interests created by the free operation of the market. Their assumption parrots Adam Smith's narrative that capitalism is somewhat inherent to human nature. Searle notes, the science often caused offence by implying that human nature was everywhere the same, and that little noticed need to be taken of religious tradition. The laws which regulate the production and distribution of wealth are the same in every country and stage of society. In an article entitled Some Moral Aspects of the Great Exhibition, published in The Economist, a journal founded in 1843 to promote free trade, has a surprisingly self-aware conclusion. This piece calls out the faux, all-embracing narrative of development economics and highlights that there is no place in capitalism for relationships that don't revolve around exchange. It identifies that industrial capitalism continues to expand, either consuming or exterminating people inhabiting the terrains that it encroaches onto. It identifies the gaps between the voice of the raisin and the material realities of commercial expansion. In doing so, it registers the breakdown of a peaceful imperial mission, posing in its place a metropolitan agenda characterized by greed, coercion, and violence. I mean, what a concept. It's such a fascinating insight into the narrative of the time, and I really enjoyed bringing this story to you. I hope you enjoyed it too. That's it for today, and I will see you next time.